my name is Isabella and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be painting this gem called Calcite. So what I like to do first, usually is a very light sketch as you see here. And I will add masking fluid to preserve some of the whitest white and highlights of my piece. Even though masking fluid is technically colorless, companies do add some dye into it so you can tell where you have placed it on your painting in case you're doing something much bigger and more elaborate. So you see here as neon orange, and the brand I'm using is called Grumbracker. Now once the masking fluid is dry, then I get ready and mix all the paint that I wanted to go on my first layer. Being prepared is actually very important on this first step because the techniques I'll be showing is very time sensitive. A lot of the watercolor effects really depend on how wet or how dry the paper is, so while you're in the middle of it, you don't have the time to stop and mix new paint. Moving forward, let's start the first layer. So this layer or this step is generally how I start most of my paintings, and it's called wet on wet, essentially wet paint on wet paper. Just take a mop brush or a big brush and load up with clear water and paint the entire area where you want colors to mix or seep into. Once you have an even coat of water, go ahead and drop in the pre-mixed paint that you have prepared for. Generally, I like to use the lighter colors first and also paint on a tilted surface and let gravity do some of the work for me. Any watercolor before it dries is actually very flexible, contrary to what most people think about watercolor. And when it's so wet, if you decided you didn't like the colors you put down, or you don't like how they're mixing, or you accidentally put down a little too much, you can very quickly absorb the colors with a damp piece of paper or a damp brush. So before the pigments seep into the paper and settle in, it is still very malleable. Honestly, this is my favorite stage of the painting. I love watching the colors spread and mix together on the paper, having all of that lovely texture and pattern, the fluidity of everything, and the softness of the edges. It's just so much fun. Once you're happy with the colors you put down and the effects you created, let it dry. Don't keep working on it. Even if you're not happy with it and it's come to that stage where it's not wet or dry, it's that in-between damp stage and it's no longer shiny and your colors are no longer spreading, that's the time to stop, because if you keep working on it, you can sometimes ruin the subtle effects that you have and actually create watermarks. So once your first layer is dry, you can now start building on top of this, adding more value, more saturation, more colors, and slowly get to the point of a painting where you can call it finished. Essentially, most of the layers after this is all glazing. It's exactly how it sounds like. It's like glazing on top of cake or pork chop. I can only think of food examples, but you're adding on top of a base layer. If you're paying close attention, you'll realize I'm basically doing a wet on wet layer again, except this time a smaller targeted section and less water. When I'm done with the left area, I move on to the right section of this gem, skipping over the middle section and using that as a barrier. And you want to be cautious of that as you continue to paint. Having these dry barriers in between newly painted areas that is still wet prevents the two areas from affecting each other. For example, I wouldn't want the left side's dark violet to seep into the brighter oranges in my right side and muddle the brilliancy. Alright, now on to my last section of layer number 2, again with glazing and a bit of wet on wet, adding value, color, and I'm paying attention to how the gemstone is cut. There are these very interesting irregular stripes that are going through these gems, so you see me tilting my sketchbook the other direction and let the gravity drag the paint upwards, or well, downwards, but up towards the top of the sketchbook. Then to continue adding more details and describe what's going on the gem, I am doing some dry brushing with a flat brush, and I purposely roughed up the edges of my bristles to create some interesting streaks. Once all of layer 2 sections are dry, I'm adding yet another layer of glazing / wet on wet to kind of unify the 3 sections and add some more color. Once I've determined I have enough color and built up my values, I'm going to let it dry completely before removing the masking fluid. If I don't, then I can easily tear the paper. Now to remove masking fluid, I was using something called a rubber cement pickup. It's basically plastic, kind of like the rubber soles of sneakers. And it's pretty cheap, probably $1 or $2 at Blix. Now I hope you remember how bright and brilliant that white was when I first removed the masking fluid, because I want you to compare it to what I'm going to do next. If you don't remember, just go back to 6 minutes and 39 seconds. Now on to the last layer. I'm adding some water first to make sure the paint I drop in have soft edges, and then I'm adding white gouache on the top of the gem and softening it further with a damp brush. Now you may wonder why I don't just use gouache for all the other highlights too and not deal with masking fluid. It's because gouache it's a very cool white and it has a chalky, pastel-y kind of texture. And it's good for a lot of things, but sometimes not so much warm highlights or very bright highlights. So there you have it, the finished calcite painting. If you like this tutorial, please hit the like button and the subscribe button. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments and leave any suggestions of videos you'd like to see in the future. Follow me on social media to see what I'm up to lately, and until next time, thanks for watching.